Pleasure to be here.
How are you doing, sir?
Pretty good.
Can you introduce yourself to our audience first before we start our interview?
Well, my name is Fred Fleitz, and I'm Vice Chair of the America First Policy Institute, a conservative think tank here in Washington, D.C. I'm former Chief of Staff of the Trump National Security Council, and I'm a former CIA analyst.
Okay, so America First policy, a lot of our audience don't understand it. What is America First policy?
Well, it doesn't translate well for our friends abroad because it sounds like isolationism, but it really isn't. It's an approach to national security from Trump's first term that calls for a strong American president, a strong U.S. foreign policy, a strong U.S. military, the prudent use of military force when our strategic interests are at risk, and keeping us out of unnecessary conflicts. We don't want to get into new wars, but we want to stand with our allies when necessary. We believe in alliances. America First means that members of alliances have to carry their own weight. We're not too fond of the United Nations, but we'll work with it when it is in our interests. And we're interested in securing supply chains. So I guess it's a form of realism, but it is not America alone, and it is not isolationism.
I mean, it sounds okay. It doesn't give a negative connotation because I went through all this globalist agenda, and I think that has been happening even in South Korea, and that's how the left-wing party, like here in the States, the Democratic Party in Korea, has been relying upon. So this independence, energy independence, isn't that very important for America to be?
And energy independence, and keeping America out of treaties like the Paris Climate Accord that are the globalists love but are bad.
I think that's
American
one of the best
workers.
decisions that Trump did on day one.
And that's the second time he withdrew from that treaty, of course. But the theory of America First is that we put the American people, the American worker, the American economy first before the president sends troops abroad or signs some trade agreement or sends weapons to another nation. First, we take care of our people. And frankly, that's the approach most nations take.
Do you agree with me when I say when you weaken America, you use it with energy, this Green New Deal, and then the global world rely less upon America. So weaker America brings more chaos to the world. Do you agree with that?
No, I definitely agree with that. And I think the incredible weakness of the Biden administration made the world much less stable, much less safe. It led, I think, to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. I think Iran became much stronger. North Korea sort of spun out of control with missile tests. I think it led to the Hamas terrorist attack on Israel because this perception of a weaker United States and the perception that there was a growing absence of American deterrence to keep America's adversaries at bay.
It's almost by design, right? I feel that way. Like these globalists, like George Soros, do they want this kind of world chaos happen? Like even with Iran, when Trump froze their asset, I think it was Biden who ordered South Korea to give the money back. I think it was $4.5 billion, $5 billion to Iran. And then on October 7th, Hamas attacked Israel. Do you see correlation there?
First, I will say that Iran is about $100 billion richer today than it would be if Trump had been president because Biden didn't enforce oil sanctions.
So they wanted them to be strong. That's how I view it.
I don't actually see it that way. I don't think it was deliberate. I think it was incompetence. I think it was this fantasy, globalist worldview, not recognizing real threats, prioritizing things like the Green New Deal, not defending borders. I do think not defending borders, that was deliberate. I think that was an effort by the Biden administration to change the demographic nature of our nation to help Democrats win elections. But I don't think making America weaker is part of some sinister plot. That's just not the way I see things.
Because then I don't understand their logic, because it's just 1 + 1 is 2. You can add up, and it would bring chaos to it, to the Middle East, what's going on right now. So do you see immediately, like Trump is 1 month in now, do you think the world is much more stabilized than the prior administration, the prior Biden administration?
I think there's signs it's going to be much more stable. And, I think there's a potential for a peace agreement in the war in Ukraine. Trump has a full court press to do that. I think there's a possibility for some type of peace agreement between Israel and Hamas. And, you know, we didn't get a ceasefire in that agreement until after Trump was elected. And I think that when you have a strong American president that America's adversaries fear, it's very stabilizing. Trump has opened the door to talking to China, to talking to Iran. I think he's probably going to have a one-on-one meeting with Kim Jong-un if Kim meets certain preconditions. And I think this means we will have a more stable world.
What kind of preconditions does Kim Jong-un have to meet, do you think? Like regarding nuclear?
Well, I should say, in this whole interview, I am speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for
sure.
Although I know a lot of people in the Trump administration. I think at a minimum, there's going to have to be an agreement that North Korea cut its ties with Russia, stop providing weapons to Russia for the war in Ukraine, stop providing troops to that war.
Yeah.
And, you know,
a lot of North Koreans are dying right now.
What a tragedy that these North Korean soldiers are being sent and basically gunned down on the battlefield, being used as cannon fire in a war that North Korea has no interests in, and I think that has to be reversed as soon as possible.
Do you know what the number is? Because we don't have the clear number. What's going on in North Korea?
I understand North Korea sent about 15,000 soldiers. I just know the casualty rate is believed to be very high, and there's a lot of reasons for that. They're not battle-tested soldiers. I don't think the Russians are. I think the Russians are putting these soldiers in capacities where they wouldn't put Russians. But there's also reports that these are very well-trained special operations soldiers who may be operating behind enemy lines. It's unclear what they're doing.
So going back to the Russia-Ukraine situation, do you like what's coming out of the rhetoric of Zelensky? You know, he's kind of having this war of words between President Trump and Zelensky. Does he have the right to say all this things that he's saying right now?
Well, I published an article in the journal American Greatness today on that, and I express how disappointed I am that Zelensky and European leaders have been throwing temper tantrums over Trump's peace efforts. They don't want us to talk to the Russians. Well, how can we negotiate peace without talking to the Russians? And you know what? To get this peace treaty, there's going to be painful concessions for both sides. And we're going to have to make offers to both sides. You know, we're going to have to offer them concessions. And this has just caused the Europeans and Zelensky to throw fits. It's just not very helpful. And when the leader of another nation starts insulting the president of the United States, who was already fed up with this guy, because Zelensky doesn't seem to want to end the war, or he wants conditions to end it that are completely unrealistic, it's made President Trump angry, and I think that's why he responded the way he did. How
much did American taxpayers give to Ukraine so far? Because I'm confused with the numbers. Is it in the almost like $1 trillion now?
It's not $1 trillion,
but billions and billions of dollars.
I think it's like 300 billion, but I don't have the latest.
300 billion. So I remember when Senator Tim Scott, he gave a speech and he said, "Don't worry, Americans. You know that money's gonna go to America back. You know, coming back to America," which he meant. It was going to like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, all these military industrial complex companies. And it's kind of maddening. Is that true? His statement? Did you hear that?
I did hear that. I never believed that. But even more significant is a recent report that $100 billion in aid given to Ukraine is missing.
And how much is missing? $100 billion is missing. So where is that? Where?
Well, you know, there's already concerns about corruption by the Ukrainian government. And at my think tank, we don't really talk about the corruption angle and the fact that there hasn't been a democratic election since May of 2024, because this is wartime. We know bad things happen during war.
The corruption is for Doge, right?
We know. Well, maybe Doge found this $100 billion, but it does concern me if that much is missing. I'm very concerned because in all likelihood, Congress will be voting on another aid package this year, and they barely passed one last year. And if Zelensky isn't cooperating with Trump, and if there's allegations of huge amounts of fraud, it's not clear to me whether Congress will agree to send any more military aid.
Because it's maddening to hear that we waste $100 billion. We don't know where that is. And we have homeless people here in America, you know, fentanyl problems. We have veterans problems. why are we sending all these money to these foreign nations that doesn't even like us that much? So do you understand that regular folk mentality?
That's an argument that's been made recently concerning USAID, the U.S. Agency for International Development, which has been closed down and merged into the State Department because there have been many reports of just appalling waste and really ridiculous projects, such as a musical about the diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy in Ireland. Now, this is a really dumb idea, but Ireland's not a developing country. Why would any USAID money be spent in Ireland? Why isn't that money being spent in Africa to feed starving children or to help build homes for homeless people? It's being sent to Ireland. The Irish don't need USAID money. And that's not even the worst example of this waste. So there's
Is that true too? Like a transgender comic book, they were funding that? Is that true?
Yes.
Which country is that going to?
I think that went to Brazil, and then there was money spent on a Sesame Street in Arabic in Iraq.
So I don't understand, as an American taxpayer, how is that beneficial to America to try to convince Brazilians kids to transgender to the other race?
The Democrats were obviously using USAID as a political tool. And I've heard people say, well, why are we sending all this money abroad? You just said that. Well, America does that because we're a compassionate people and because we're so wealthy.
That is true.
It's a small percentage of our wealth to help the poor and needy. And look, we may get some benefit by helping them, but we're a Judeo-Christian country, and it's the right thing to do to try to help the poor and homeless and helpless. So that's why this was created, and America's always felt that way. But the fact that people on the far left have been abusing this program for ridiculous far left globalist initiatives is ruining it. I don't want it shut down. I want it to be run responsibly.
Okay, so you believe Marco Rubio is the guy who can fix that problem?
Rubio was an incredible choice to be Secretary of State. I think he's very level-headed. He served on the Foreign Relations Committee as chairman. He was a ranking member on the Intelligence Committee. He has a very sophisticated approach to international relations. He knows a lot about the Asia Pacific, South Korea, Taiwan, China. So I think that he was a real winner for President Trump.
That's what I think too. I think he's a great Secretary of State choice. So U.S. Agency for International Development, that's what USAID stands for. South Korea is paying attention to this a lot, USAID, because some of that money went to the Association of World Election Bodies, called the AWEB. It's headquartered in South Korea. Did you know about this?
I've heard about it, yes.
You heard about it? Are you concerned about it? Because South Koreans are talking about election integrity, voter fraud all the time now.
Well, we know that the enemies of democracy are always trying to meddle and interfere and ruin democracies. We saw that in the United States. It clearly was meddling in America's elections by Russia and China and Iran. And ironically, you may not know this, in 2016, there were all these reports that Russia meddled to help Trump win. Well, I've been talking to the House Intelligence Committee staff. They think the evidence indicates that Russia meddled to help Hillary Clinton win.
But wasn't that like a minuscule amount of money? Was like less than $500,000?
It's true. It wasn't a lot of money.
And it was just on like Facebook and stuff?
But the point is that
the media propped up this much more.
This was all manipulated by the Democratic Party to create this narrative of Russia collusion.
That's such an evil party, I just can't believe that they concocted this. Many South Koreans still believe that Russia helped Trump.
Around the world, they think that. Now, in 2020, there was evidence, and former CIA director, John Ratcliffe, who was director of national intelligence at the time, he wrote after the 2020 election that there was intelligence that Russia meddled in the election to help Trump win that was very weak, and intelligence that China was meddling to help Trump lose that was pretty strong.
I believe, yeah.
And the Russia intel was promoted by intelligence officials, and the China intel was downplayed. There's actually a politicization. Ombudsman wrote a report on this, that analysts and analytic managers in intelligence agencies were manipulating the evidence to make sure that their reports did not help Trump win and ensure his loss. But I mean, our adversaries are always doing this. There's no question South Korea is such an important state for regional security.
It really is, yeah.
It is an important American strategic partner. There's no question that Russia, China and North Korea, and maybe even Russia, are meddling in South Korea's democratic system because instability in South Korea is in their best interest.
So you were saying it's not just CCP, other nations are involved, Russia, like China.
Well, I think we can be certain that North Korea and China are involved. Wouldn't surprise me if Russia's involved because they've meddled in other elections. There's evidence Iran has meddled in American elections. I don't know that they've meddled in South Korean elections, but you just have to assume in a free system, totalitarian states have a lot of freedom to do things they can't do at home. You know, they can manipulate social media, they can do other things in the free press to make people believe things, and then they can meddle with ballots and voting machines and voting practices. Unfortunately, free societies are very vulnerable to this. They have to keep their guard up.
Did you have any reports about what happened in the 2020 American election? It came out in some Korean media outlets that in Phoenix, Arizona, there was a Korean airline aircraft that was filled with Biden ballots. You haven't heard about any of that. Okay. So last year you went to South Korea, like in July, with Stephen Yates, was your friend Stephen Yates, and you. What I believe is, according to the reports, that you talked about this voter fraud or election integrity issue with some of the Korean lawyers here. Is there some credence to that report?
Well, they gave a very compelling report, and there were PowerPoint slides with photographs of altered ballots and how ballots were supposed to look, how they did look, and I thought it looked very troubling. And I hope that's getting adequate press coverage in South Korea, because what happens in the United States, the left always just writes off any evidence of cheating. They won't believe. They know what's going on. They know there's cheating. They don't want to talk about it. And I think that's probably going on in South Korea too, that the liberal establishment doesn't want to hear about it because they like the way the elections are coming out.
Because it's maddening to think that USAID money, taxpayers' money, American taxpayers' money, funneling this Association of World Election Bodies that helps rigging the whole election system in South Korea. So I think
it would be par for the course from the way USAID was run under the Biden administration. I mean, I can't confirm that that's happening, but it's the kind of thing the corrupt Biden administration would have done.
Okay. Do you look forward to Trump meeting with Kim Jong-un again, or do you think there's not going to be a deal that will be met?
Well, there was a real problem during the Biden administration in that high-level diplomacy was barely conducted. The last time Biden met with Putin was in February 2022. He met occasionally with Chinese President Xi, but they really weren't serious meetings. I mean, given Biden's declining mental capacity, I think Xi didn't take those meetings seriously. And most of the envoys we sent to Beijing were sent there to talk about climate change. They weren't sent there to talk about Taiwan or the South China Sea or other issues that should have been discussed. Trump understands that American presidents have to be talking to the heads of state of our friends and our foes. And I believe it's important that Trump talk to Putin, he talked to Xi, and he should be talking to Kim Jong-un. And look, we know that the bilateral diplomacy he had with Kim was not fully successful. He did not succeed in denuclearizing North Korea or ending its missile program. But there was a suspension of long-range missile tests from late 2017 until 2022. There hasn't been a North Korean nuclear test since September of 2017. Those are significant achievements.
Which Trump achieved in a way.
Trump achieved. And this all melted away because Biden decided to neglect North Korea, named a part-time special envoy. I think Kim felt that he was snubbed. And then after the disastrous U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and the perception of American weakness, I think Kim saw an opportunity, and that led to an enormous surge in North Korean missile tests in 2022. At least 90 tests, three times larger than they ever tested in a single year. And this led President Yoon, who was very worried, to propose in early 2023, maybe starting a nuclear weapons program in South Korea, maybe bringing U.S. tactical nuclear weapons back to South Korea. That caused a panic in the Biden administration. And it got Yoon an invitation to the White House, the Washington Declaration, the Camp David principles. And the Biden administration actually achieved something good to promote security in the region. But this was reactive, and it was all driven by President Yoon's leadership. He saw what happened in 2022, and frankly, Asia was afraid of all these missile tests by North Korea. Nobody knew what the heck was going on, and they knew it was driven by a lack of American leadership. The fact that Joe Biden had just decided to ignore our friends in the Asia Pacific.
So a lot of Koreans give credit to President Yoon about his foreign relations front.
Yes.
So I heard some people from the North Korea side that has been saying that they think their regime goes on forever, right? It's a dynasty. They inherit their kingdom, so to speak. But in America, you have this presidential election cycle every 4 years. So in their front, it's like, even though we go along with it, this time with Trump, next time it could be a Democrat president, and it's always the Americans that flip-flops back and forth. What do you say to that?
It's a good observation, and these dictators like Kim Jong-un will be in there for decades, and his successor will be a member of his family and will continue his policies. That's why Trump has to move fast and achieve his policies very early in this administration. That's why I think summits with Xi and with Putin and Kim will be in 2025. Because as we go further into the administration, he starts to become a lame duck, and America starts preparing for the next election. 2025 is crucial. That's why Trump has already moved so fast just in his first month in office to do so much in domestic policy and foreign policy.
Got it. When I was in college, my professor in geography, he always emphasized that America and Russia didn't really have a hostile relation, other than, they didn't really, shed blood, even though we went through a Cold War. So we can actually have a very great relationship. If America and Russia somehow have a harmonious relationship, the world will be much, much better. But I always read on the paper, especially on the legacy media side, that Russia has to be the enemy. It's always Russia. When hacking happens, it's always Russia. Even sometimes when that happens not to be true, and when Russia helped Trump. So even with Ukraine, I understand that Ukraine used to be pro-Russia back in 2013, until 2013, and then 2014 you had this Euromaidan revolution that happened with the backing of CIA. What I understand, under Obama administration, they brought down the government and put in a puppet there, which is more of a globalist agenda. And in Russia front, they don't like NATO. They don't want Ukraine to join in NATO. And under Biden, they kind of signaled that NATO can bring in Ukraine. And wasn't it on the United States side that provoked Russia in some way, or do you disagree with that assessment?
Well, General Keith Kellogg, who is the President's special envoy for Russia and Ukraine, and I wrote a paper on this that came out last spring. It's on the America First Policy Institute website. I hope your viewers will take a look at it. Now, look, Russia invaded Ukraine, but I think there's no question in 2023 that Joe Biden and Vladimir Zelensky flaunting possible Ukrainian membership in NATO greatly irritated Putin. And after the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan by the U.S. and basically other signs of gross incompetence by Biden, you may remember when he said he might tolerate a limited invasion by Russia of Ukraine. I think it emboldened Putin to move. It would not. I think Trump is right. This would not have happened under a strong president. And look, it was well known that NATO membership for Ukraine is a red line. And it isn't possible to get Ukraine into NATO because it would take a unanimous vote. So why was Biden talking about that? Why was he dangling this in front of Zelensky?
Lloyd Austin also talked about it too, right?
As late as mid-February 2022, when the tanks were at the border, offers could have been made to Putin to stop the invasion, and Biden didn't do it. He said two things. First of all, if you invade, we'll sanction you. And if you invade, we'll start sending military aid to Ukraine. It was crazy. I mean, if we thought they were going to invade, the weapons should have already been there. But you know, Biden was the most incompetent president in foreign policy in history. He did a lot of damage to global security, and Ukraine's still paying the price.
How many people, so we don't know by the legacy media, how many people on the Ukraine side and Russian side died so far?
I can't give you figures right now.
Approximate figure, you don't know? Because we don't even have a ballpark number.
Hundreds of thousands, but I don't have the figures with me.
And do you think, well, what do you think about that assessment that America always, you know, the boogeyman is always Russia, even prior to this war?
No, I'm glad you asked that question, because I believe that America has to have a long-term goal for its policy with Russia that goes beyond ending the war in Ukraine. That goal should be normalizing relations and helping Russia become a state of good standing in Europe, because Russia is a European state.
Yeah.
It's not an Asian state.
No.
Most Russians live in the Asian part of Russia. Historically, it's been part of Russia. And Biden's isolation of Russia and pushing it in the arms of China as part of what people are calling a new axis, an axis against the rules-based global order, is very dangerous for global security. And as you know, Iran and North Korea are considered part of this axis. Yeah. We had to break this axis. We had to break this relationship between Russia and China, Russia and North Korea, Russia and Iran. And I mean, Trump has even talked about welcoming Russia back into the G8.
Yes.
I like that.
Do you support that?
I like that way of thinking. G8. Russia hasn't earned it yet, but that's the kind of goal we should talk about. What will America's relationship be with Russia in 10 or 20 years? It should be a friendly relationship. It should be Russia working cooperatively with the United States and with Europe in productive economic relations, not spending money on weapons, not cutting undersea cables, not buying weapons from Iran and North Korea, not sending missile technology and satellite technology to North Korea. This is, and why would Russia want to help North Korea and Iran develop missiles and maybe even nuclear weapons? I mean, Russia historically doesn't trust these nations. We have to strive towards a new approach to this relationship, and I think Trump is going to do that.
Do you know that a lot of conservatives side with Russia? If you go to X, a lot of people do side with Russia. Do you know about that? And are you worried about it, or you understand it?
Well, I don't know what you're referring to. I think
regarding this war, it was a deep state that provoked this whole thing, you know. And
I don't know what that's about. They can't. It's certainly not true.
And there are conservatives who doesn't like to see that Ukraine flag on a lot of elected officials.
Well, I mean, look, Ukraine is certainly the victim here.
They were attacked. Yeah, no doubt about that.
This is a brutal and vicious invasion and war. Russia certainly conducted war crimes. In a perfect world, we would expel Russian troops from Ukraine and put Putin on trial for war crimes. But we don't live in that kind of world. There's no way to do that. We have to pursue the possible, which means Putin's not going to be held accountable for this. And we have to move on to a relationship that's the best deal we can get. Now, in 2022, if we had sent Ukraine the weapons it needed, it may have pushed Russia back from most of the territory it took. You may remember how incompetent the Russian army was, but Biden didn't do that. Europe didn't do that. They were worried about escalation. That allowed Russia to catch up and to dig in. Now there's no prospect of getting it out of the territory it stole from Ukraine. So we need to make the best deal we can and think long-term, what will America's relationship be with Russia?
Fred, can you say some encouraging words to our conservative Korean audience? They're in a devastated state because of the impending impeachment decision in the Constitutional Court in March. And also, where can our audience see your work?
Well, America stands with South Korea, one of our most important allies, an important strategic ally. And America knows, and the Trump administration realizes, that political turmoil in South Korea is very dangerous for regional and global security. And we desperately want to see this resolved in a fair way so South Korea can continue working with the United States and Japan against real threats to our mutual security. And that main threat is China. And if you want to catch the material that I've been producing for the America First Policy Institute, go to americafirstpolicy.com.
Thank you very much, sir.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Good to see you.